everyone. Welcome to another awesome day of FileMaker training. I'm Richard Carlton. Over here, the other way. Thank you. All right. Welcome to FMTrain.tv, where every day is an awesome day for FileMaker training. Today is Friday. I've had way too much caffeine. Today is open Q&A day. We're running into people who have very similar questions. And the first demo or two that I have, or conversation we have, is really about, once again, mechanical thought processes. So before we get into that, I want to remind you that if you go to the FMTrain.tv website, the live training button, that's where you can see the broadcast schedule. If you want to support the channel, I greatly appreciate it always. If you want to help support the channel, come to this, not the subscriber access, hit the bundles over here. Once you purchase a bundle, you will get subscriber access. We drive everything through a website that's powered by DAPI and PHP and FileMaker and stuff, so it's pretty great. So we are updating video content, working on that aggressively. So, of course, we've been using FileMaker for many years, so whenever there's a release of FileMaker, there'll always be some new things, there'll be some bug fixes, but fundamentally, they don't really change everything because it would break everyone's solution. The goal with an upgrade is for it to be seamless, maybe better somehow, maybe faster, but certainly not retroactively break stuff. That's always a negative thing. So just keep in mind that sometimes we shoot videos on a topic. That topic may never change for years, right? So sometimes we'll leave that video alone. So that's one of those things that comes up. So I'm going to make sure that we have questions and answer session. Here's some questions that we were digging around. We saw some stuff here. We wanted to talk about these briefly. Question number one. So what we're going to try to do is apply our special ninja skills. And what are ninja skills? Basically, we have a mechanical thought process for writing scripts, but also for building the relationship graph. Why do we have basic rote kind of skills for these things? Because one is most people have never programmed. They don't understand what that even is. And two, the relationship graph in FileMaker is a little bit obtuse and kind of, there's not really it's like if I drop you in the desert with a shovel and say, build a house, like what the hell, right? What instructions do you have, right? Assuming that all the materials are there. Just you have a blank surface, what do you do? So we've come up with some basic rules, what I call the mechanical thought process, or a very specific way of thinking, step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. And that applies both to anchor buoy and to the relationship graph. Once again, if you know enough to argue with me about those techniques, like, well, wouldn't it be better if this and this and that and other, then probably you don't need to follow that mechanical thought process. But for a lot of us, including myself, I get spread as the boss and RCC and live stream and all this other stuff I do. I get spread pretty thin sometimes. Sometimes I will revert back to that thought process just so I know, like a checklist in the helicopter. Okay, before takeoff, rotors are turning. Step 2, people are seat belted in. Step 3, there's gas in the helicopter. You're like, yep, gas is in the helicopter. So you have a checklist. This is kind of a mental checklist you follow. You could write it down if you want, but that's what we've been doing. So we're going to try to apply that here and see how far we get. Margaret kind of set this up. I've read the first 2 questions here. I'm ready for them. What happens after that, I don't know. If you folks have questions in flight, let me know. This is the question. Person comes up, says, hey, I built this sample file. So, and here's the sample file. And this is, so I built this sample file, and thanks to all your help, I have a portal up here. And when I press a button in the portal, one of these buttons here, it pops a card. And then what the person says is that instead of popping a card, I would like it to update information down here. So we're on this record here, and we want to have information on this record down here. So this person, whoever he or she is, posted this file in a public forum. Off the top of my head, I don't know. Everyone has their fighter pilot call signs. So whoever Zeskli is, he didn't create this, but another person did. So the issue is that he puts this question out there, and instead of looking at what they did, let's talk about it from our mechanical thought process, our scripting process, right? So what is the rule? Someone calls you, you have to walk them through the process. So somehow there is a table of songs, right? So if I go to layout mode over here, first we have to understand that alt version of stems, whatever that is, right? So we have alt version of stems. And so this is if we look at the relationship graph, I made one note on the relationship graph. Some of you are going to freak when I show you this. I saw this and I went, oh my God, it's a spider. So I put this note here, but this is the sample file, right? And maybe this is not really a full spider, right? I mean, like a spider, like maybe all these are being used to drive this one, but I think this person is probably on the road to painting themselves into a corner with a solution. So this table is called music library. So let's take a look at the tables. Holy shit, there's a lot of tables in here. So they have a table called music library, which has one record. I think it's kind of like a preferences record. If it has one record, kind of like preferences, like we do in starting point, like where there's only one record, but that gives you kind of the launching pad to have a home screen and things like that. And because really in FileMaker, you can't have a layout with no records, right? Like I want to show a menu, like a home screen or something. I want just a menu with buttons. Well, you're going to show that in FileMaker with a layout, and for FileMaker to really work correctly, it needs at least one record in there, right? And so that's kind of what this preference record. We've had this conversation before. If some of you want to know about preference records, we've had that conversation. Put a message in chat. Margaret will find the preference record live stream. There's probably at least 2 of them. She'll drop those recordings in here so you can watch it. So part of what I'm doing today is to direct you where to get the answers in other videos, right? That's basically what I'm trying to do for a lot of this. So that looks like a preference record. Then he has this alt stem thing, and alt stem is not the name of a table. So if I go back over to relationships, I have this alt stems. I'm gonna double click that, alt version stems. So the issue is that if the person's over here and you want to, I'm going to hit OK over here. If the person's up here and they press a button, then you want to find the related data and bring it down here. So you can solve this a couple different ways, right? Mechanically, if the person calls you on the phone, you're like, well, if you're up here and you see up here and you see like a number, like a ID number, I don't know if that's the number right there, you could copy this number, pop a new window, go to the alt stem area, perform a find or something. There's 19 records in here, right? But if I'm looking at this, it's like really, yeah, there's a lot of stuff that's not in here. Let me put it all in here. Okay, so now we have it all, browse mode. Now we got more data. So it looks like if I had to guess, does this person even have a primary key in here? Let's take a look at field definitions, because we need to make sure that they have a primary key. So these are all the things that you go back to. Partly, if you build a solution, you're going to help a coworker, but clearly this is a solution I didn't build, so you're like, what is going on? So do we have a count? We have a calculated value, which is going to be itself, which is great. So it's going to update that auto enter calculation. That's blank. So I don't think there's a serial in here, right? So that's part of the problem. There's no unique. So here's the deal with databases, right? If I just flip through these, I don't see anything that's really reliably, like there's 2 of these 506s in here, right? And then some of them are duplicated. So here's the deal with this, is that you must have, and maybe it's this thing up here, I can't tell. Well, those are blank there. So once again, sample data, who knows? This has to have a primary key in it so you can identify the records uniquely, okay? What you have to do is if you're up here and you want to write a script that does this, I'm going to tell the person, copy the value or make a note of it, whatever value you saw, pop a window over here, perform a find, at least identify the data, okay? Then you could copy and paste the data, very basic. Although I said the word copy and paste, we could use variables, right? Copy and paste the data, and then come back over here and stick it in values down here. Stick it in just blank, these are like global fields down here if you wanted to, right? You could do it that way. This person is trying to do it with go to related record and things like that. The rub is, once again, I have with, like even yesterday, some of you, it's like, Richard, why don't you use go to related record? Yesterday I was writing a script and troubleshooting a problem, and I didn't want to do the mental gymnastics of looking at the relationship and jumping through the GTRR. And so what I did is I changed the script. I commented out the go to related record, and I coded it with a grab the value in a variable and then go to the other location and perform a find. That way I could see it with fidelity very simply, because understanding going somewhere and doing a find mentally is a hell of a lot easier than trying to look at a diagram and figuring out that you haven't screwed it up. If I say, Define fields. If I go over here to relationships, okay, and I'm like looking at this, trying to figure out, did it go through the thing the right way? And what are all these like little things over here? What is that? Right? And then you're over here with this, and you're like, okay, is this going to work? And you double click that. No, that didn't go. How about if I click that right there? Can I double click that? So the GTRR, if you do it all day, every day, but a lot of the people here in this live stream, we do FileMaker part-time, half-time. Hot Air Balloon Ken does not do coding all day, every day in FileMaker, I'm pretty sure. He joyrides around in hot air balloons. He does all sorts of stuff. I definitely don't code every day. I code an hour a day, maybe 2 hours a day, mostly to help this live stream out. Now, it's good for me to do that because it reminds me of all the I've forgotten. That being said, maybe less mental gymnastics is useful. And so that's why I did the find on that. So the short version is that you could set over here, this data here could be driven by a primary, a key. So you could have a value over here, like an arbitrary. So if I go, let me go over here. I'm going to close this. I'm going to hit OK. I'm going to be over here. What I want to do is I'm going to set up a brand new relationship. I'm going to add to the spider hell. I'm going to go, I want, and so that's the alt stem. So I'm going to go over here to tables. I'm going to go to the library here first. I'm going to say, I'm in here. I'm going to say ID RC. That's me. Okay. And this is for bottom. I'll just call that a value for that. So ID RC. So we know it's RC. So that's Richard, right? So we know that what I'm doing. Then I'm going to go over to, let's jump to tables again. Let's go to the, what was it? Alternate version. I think it's this one. And I would say ID RC, and then whatever we want to do. It's a key, right? The primary key, it's a key. Now the rub is that the primary key in this situation is over here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say it's primary on this side. I'm going to say create it. I'm going to come over just for giggles. I'm going to say auto enter serial number 100. Let's call it RC 100. Okay, we say so in over here as we create records, it will create a key. On the album side over here on the main music library, which is once again like a preference table, if that makes sense. I had something about ID RC over here. Let me go back to that, RC bottom. And this is going to be the foreign key over here. So to activate the relationship, we want to grab the value from the external, bring it to the preferences, so then the relationship activates, right? So I'm going to say change that. I'm going to say relationship wise, I'm going to come over here. I'm going to create a new table occurrence, which had the outstem version. I'm going to say outstem, I'll just call it RC or T. If you see TO1 up here, it's because I was like, God, I really need to number this stuff a little bit. I'm going to say TO1A, outstems, right? I say, okay, it creates this right here. Then down here, I want to zoom in. I'll probably zoom in a little bit on this. I don't know if you folks can see this or not. Where's my zoomy zoom? Can I zoom? Zoomy zoom. There we go, a little better. So what I want to do is scroll down here and I'm looking for the ID so it's ready to go. There it is right here. There's that one. Then right here, I've got this one and I want to bring this down. So I want to connect this one to, come down here, scroll down a little bit. There we go, this one right there. Okay, so I've got that done. I hit OK. Now the other thing I want to do is on the other layout over here, I want to drag the field on there, which it wasn't on here. I'm going to drag it on there. It's the one that says RCC on it. Go to browse mode. I'm going to go to record number 1. So there's no, I can't tell if there's a primary key in here, but it looks to be like there's no primary key. I can't edit in the field. Anytime you can't edit in the field, you're going to click on the field. You're going to go to the right layout mode, right pane, right pane, and then the right panel of the right pane. Make sure browse mode's enabled. I can double click it, make sure it turns on the label, go to browse mode. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, there's nothing in here. If I create a new one, it'll add it, but I need to retroactively fix these other ones. So I'm going to say, I'm going to go to records. I'm going to say replace, and that allows us to reset the serial numbers. Replace with serial number, starting at this, increment by 1, and update the calculation down here. So now we've got it. So now they all have serial numbers on there. So now we're set. So now what we need to do is the fields that are down here, we need to, and I see things flashing over here, Mark. If you have a question, feel free to interrupt.
No questions, just people saying that they've begun renumbering their stuff after yesterday's stream. So,
Okay, cool. So I've got that field there, and I'm going to switch to, this has a trigger on it of all things. I don't know what that does. I'm going to go to TO1, and then I got this one. So these two fields here are now functional, and they're driven technically by this value here, right? So this is the preferences side, kind of like the home screen and starting point. We have a preferences table here. And so when we press something here, we want to capture the number and stick it in here, which will activate these things. But just to check it manually in advance, I'm going to come over here. I don't see it. Where the hell did it go?
it disappeared beneath the body for some reason. I'm not
All right, so,
sure.
okay. Oh, there's a web viewer in there. Get rid of that. All right, so I don't know all that's going on here. Okay, there's another thing that's in there. Get rid of that. Another web viewer. All right, this guy is out of control, guys. So I don't know all the shenanigans that are happening here, but there's a lot of shenanigans. Here we go. Okay, and see how fast that happens? I really wish Claris would fix that. It's a warp 9 scroll function. Okay, can I kindly get this box and move it on screen so we can see it in one spot? Okay, so here we go. So I go to browse mode. So if I come down here and I put like, what was it, RC, and it was 100 or something? Is that what it was?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, so there it is. So it's activating data. If I come over here, RC 105, so let me do 105. So now that you've got fundamentally some sort of functionality that could work, all you have to do is you have to tell the person, well, if you're on this and you see this portal, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this whiter, make the portal whiter, grab, I'm going to grab this field. This field has a trigger on it. I'm afraid of stepping on the landmine because I don't know what it'll do. Oops, that was bad. Let me just put a field on here, drag it down, put a field on here. This is a field draggy thing right there. It won't style it correctly, but there's our primary key there. No, yeah, primary key right there. Go down here, go to browse mode. So there we go. So the idea, now that we've got the basic setup, is if you press a button, it's going to grab this and stick it in there, and that's all you have to do. And that's a pretty straightforward script step, right? Anyone have questions about that script step? It would be copy the value into a variable and then set it down below, right? I would set it into a variable. Actually, you could probably do it with one script step, right? It's like one of those deals like, can I name that tune? I could name that tune in 5 notes or something, right? Remember the old show? Probably most of you don't.
No, I don't have any questions. I have a semi-related question, but it is a different topic if you are ready to swap topics.
I'm going to swap topics momentarily. I'm going to set the field. I'm going to set the field here to the RC ID one here just to see. This should work. RC, I'm in library, right? It was ID, there's RC bottom. So we're going to set that. We're going to set it from that portal. Of course, I don't know what that portal was. I think it was that it? Was that the portal up here? I don't know. I think that was it. Let me try that. So then we're going to grab that value there. Okay, we'll just see if that works. Okay. I'm going to save that. I'm going to take this button over here. Yeah, was it all version stem? Is that what I have over here? Yeah, I have that. So I got it correct. Let me just take this button here, and I'm going to change it to performance script. I'm going to change it to, see, this person did a script. They don't call a script. They're doing a one script command with a GTRR. The road to hell is paved with doing one script steps or buttons with one command in them. The command should be perform a script, right? So what we do is I say, okay, we want to perform a script. We want to actually, perform a script. Go here. The script we want to perform is, how come I'm not seeing it? Choose the script to step on the list. Cancel. I'm going to get rid of this. I don't even know what's going on here. Once again, this guy, where I built this, was very busy in adding multiple overlapping web viewers, which cause unsavoriness. So, stuff. What happens? Okay, see, now it's going to this, right, which is great. RCC test, okay. Okay, great. Go to browse mode, So if I press the button like right here, it should take 0017, stick it in there, which will activate down there. So I'm going to press it 1, 2, 3. There it goes. Press it right here. See that? And it's updating down there, which is great. So that's how you solve the problem. But the idea was that it hadn't been structured well enough for this to work yet. if that makes any sense. So you have to lay the structure out first. Then your employees can call you and ask for this. If the employee had called and asked for this, we would be like, you're asking for the car to go somewhere, but there's no engine in the car. So we have to install the engine first, then we can tell you how to drive somewhere. So in that. So Margaret, do you have a question if you want to jump on that?
Kind of like a series of comments from Brooks. Now I'm dealing with not having primary keys on most tables. I wrote a script to generate the missing keys and then look them up and fill them in the related tables as foreign keys.
Yes.
I'm using get UUID as a key, hoping that a few days of work is going to pay dividends off for speeding up future development. So
yes. So the idea is that naming your stuff, being organized will always help you. And it may not help. The problem is, here's the deal. Trust me, it will help you. If you're getting UUIDs, get UUID as number. If you have a choice, that'll be marginally faster. If you have a big system, which you do, you potentially could have a big system. Use get UUID number or something. So it's a variation called number. It has a measurable improvement in performance when you start dealing with hundreds of thousands or millions of records. That's a good tip for you. But yes, documenting things, having things numbered and named correctly, always will help you, because like you go on vacation for take a really long vacation, you deserve it. You're gone for 2-3 weeks. You come back, you do some work for some different department down there. Then it's been 2 or 3 months since you worked on database. You come back, it's hard to get back into it, and it's hard to remember what you were doing. And so commenting, listen, the commenting is just there to help yourself out, right? I always do commenting to help myself, and that's why I'm very explicit. Like some of my senior engineers, like people that I'm not going to talk about, but that are actually not really here anymore, but they would complain that that I was too verbose in my comments. But these would be people who would normally not comment their code at all historically. So I will simply say that I'd rather have too many comments than not enough comments. Some people say, well, if you set 5 fields and do this other thing, it should be self-evident what you're doing. It's like, no, it's not. To a normal beginning or intermediate person, it's not evident at all. Yeah, but I'm very smart, and I'm the only person who'll ever work on this. If you're the only person ever to work on a solution, and they have a ball and chain attached to you and the desk, and you're not going anywhere, then yeah, you'll probably be the only person ever uses this. But if you ever plan on getting up and leaving your desk, or promoting up in the organization, or winning the lottery, or whatever, someone else is going to have to help support it. So anyway, I could hear the engineer in the back of my head, like, what should be self-evident? Like, no. If it was, I wouldn't be asking about it. Well, then his implications, then you're a stupid person. That I hate. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pivot forward on this, and this one right here. I'm not going to get into this one too deep, but it's a good conversation if you want to post this to people. The person says, hey, I want to, not this one, where'd it go? All right, so this is basically the comment. So I'm working to modularize a script. Okay, if you're trying to modularize a script so it can be used a bunch of different places, you need to be pretty much, let me just back this up a little bit here to frame the conversation. So this is the progression of learning. Beginners, kind of in between here, developers in here, people in here. I live kind of around in here, right? It's where I live. I've done this before, and then I don't do it enough, so I kind of starting to forget stuff like how to code PHP. The idea is that if you're trying to do write modular code like that, you should be over here in the senior ninja area. I don't think this person was probably a senior ninja when the problem is that they saw probably Todd Geis talk about, or John Sindler talk about modular code. And so because a smart person says something, then they think they should do it too, okay? Just because Neil Armstrong walked on the moon doesn't mean that other people should probably do that. Now, I'm not saying there's nothing wrong with walking the moon, but NASA and professional astronauts like that, right? I'm a good pilot, but I'm not Neil Armstrong, okay? That guy was a bad fighter pilot long before they ever put him in the rocket that went to the moon. Anyway, so the idea is just because a smart person says something doesn't mean you should do it, okay? You should evaluate it for what it's worth. I would not get into trying to write modular code unless you're a legitimate senior engineer, because it creates these problems. So the person saying, I saw someone who's really brilliant write some shit, and I want to do that because if they're smart and then I do what they do, then I must be smart too, is the conversation, literally. This is the conversation here. I'm working to write a modular script. Most of it's working fine. However, when I try to make modular sort fields, it doesn't work very well. It's hard. How do I make it work? So there's the conversation here once again. And I'm not picking on anyone. I'm just saying that if it's really hard, maybe you're not ready for that, right? If you don't know all the ins and outs of how FileMaker works, right? So the conversation goes in here, and I'm just going to summarize this for you folks a little bit. But what ends up happening is that there's a lot of people have ideas about how to do dynamic sorting, okay? And and once again, it's a progression of how clever you are. And so reading this conversation, which Mark is going to post this link up here, it's a conversation. This person asked a question, great question. Then about 4 or 5 different people tried variations of answers that work to varying degrees, which is interesting. So basically one person says, well, you could have it pre-canned, have a script that does a bunch of different sorts, and you pass a script parameter. It's probably how I would do it for basic stuff. So like, you know, that you can only sort on 4 or 5 different fields, and say it's a list view, and you want to have one script that sorts. So there's a bunch of sort commands in there, and then there's an if statement that checks the script parameter that comes into it. Pretty basic, right? And so this is kind of what this person suggested. And then this other person, right, kind of like we're going to, you know, one up each other here. You could do it dynamically if you want to do another matter. It's an unstored calculation. So once again, this person actually is pretty smart. He says you can do it dynamically. However, it uses an unstored calculation. And the way he writes this is that he's warning you that he's not the biggest fan of unstored calculations. Neither am I, right? I generally prefer, in fact, Brooks. If Brooks is running around doing a lot of unstored calculations with the size database, you have to be very careful with that because you can kill performance with those. So that gets back into caching the data, doing a calculation with a trigger, sets it into a text or number field, and that way it's always, you know, you run stuff with triggers. You don't run stuff with automatic calculations that run. We haven't talked about that in probably a month or so, but that's a big deal. So this person says, yeah, you maybe shouldn't do it. That's interesting. Then this person says it's nowhere as simple as that. And then this other person says, well, obviously you have to do this. And then down here at the end, which is really interesting, is Tony White. So Tony White has got to be retired. If he's not retired, he's probably thinking about retiring. A lot of people still do FileMaker after they retire because it's so intellectually stimulating and fun, and and you build valuable things with it. Why do we do it? You do valuable things with it. So he has it'd be better if this was in a file. I checked his website. Tony has done a lot of great things for the FileMaker community in terms of cheat sheets and things like that. So, but he tells us that there is a black box script that works reasonably well. So if you take all this code, you drop it into a script or a custom function or whatever you want to do, you put data in, it will adjust and take care of this for you. So it's an interesting automatic conversation about dynamically sorting in a script. Keep in mind that endless sorting for your end users is, once again, challenging. It gets back to this conversation, right? So if I have a customer, Big Valley Aviation, they want to sort, they never sort more than 200 records max or 300 records max at any time. That happens pretty rapidly, okay? But if they start trying to say, whoa, I want to sort 5,000 records and I want to do it constantly during the day, all the time, instantaneously, 5,000 might be okay. 10 or 15, 20,000, you're probably going to get a progress bar, beach ball. So you need to be thoughtful about when and how you're going to let users sort. It just depends. If they see a beach ball, if they complain, are they going to make your life miserable? If they don't work for you and you don't care about them or their feelings, then yeah, give them the beach ball. Give them the beach ball, right? Give them a double beach ball, double secret beach ball, right? So, but just be thoughtful about that. So this is a good one here, Margaret, for this, right? Yes. I like that. I'm just, once again, I'm not going to dig through it in great detail. I'm giving you, if some of you need this, this is where to go find it. Okay.
Yep.
Next question, Margaret. On the server side script, I want to export temporary file. How should I specify its path? Okay. One of you here suggested that we have a live stream on the comparison between Mac and Windows development. And like, where are the little snags with that, right? And my general impression, and this is just from me off the cuff, is largely there's little graphical anomalies on how fonts display. But the other area where there are bona fide differences in how more than one path is specified. And so the question is, those will vary a little bit between Windows, Mac, and Linux. And so that's one of the things I've been putting in the new starting point is this ability to kind of a couple what we call side nuggets or bonus features, and that is to have like the server create a PDF. This person here say, how do I export a file to, this is the same conversation, we've had this before, we had this about a month ago or whatever, where we were talking about how to export, and Calvin came on and helped. I could get it to export on Mac, I couldn't get to work on Windows correctly, and he helped put a little bit of magical kung fu in there and make it work. There's a server-side path conversation right here in the Claris help. However, this doesn't take into account that there's a variation between Mac and Windows, and I'm not sure why, right? So any specified file to be in documents. So once again, let's talk about this briefly. So paths in the FileMaker platform, back when FileMaker was first created, the internet was a Wild West. You could send emails to pretend you were Steve Jobs. There was all sorts of things that could happen, and the world was not wired. The internet was a function of the U.S. Department of Defense. That's where it came from. And so the running assumption was that only the most trusted American patriots would have access to this system. And so then they opened it up to universities, and it all went to after that, right? So the issue is, amongst other things, is that they keep adding security to the operating system. So FileMaker Pro, which was created really before a lot of the security went in, is that there's a get function to get the desktop path, to get the temporary path, get the application path, get documents path. There's like 5 or 6, 7 different paths. On servers, specifically on server operating systems, and also enforced by Apple to a degree, is that they start sandboxing the application. So a sandbox is literally like if you have 5 kids or 10 kids or 20 kids in kindergarten, first grade or something, and it's recess time for them to go out and play, and they all go in the sandbox. You always hear about like play nice in the sandbox, don't throw sand at each other, right? I do that adults. Well, but let's assume that we don't trust the kids because they're really adults and they're hackery. Some of them might be good people, some might be bad. We have no idea. What the operating system, the computers do is they assume that everyone's bad, okay? And so every kid gets their own personal sandbox. And the sandbox walls are electrified, so if the kid tries to get out of the sandbox, they get a shock. They cannot transfer from one sandbox to the next. That keeps your application. So if kid A wants to be a bad kid and explode or do something unsavory, he's limited to damaging only himself. That's why the documents paths, the paths on FileMaker server are so limited because of sandboxing. Same thing on FileMaker Go. FileMaker Go, Apple is, people are like, I hate Apple. They always call it the walled garden. You're in a room, it's so beautiful, but you're locked in a room and you can't get out because Apple won't let you out. Well, the side benefit of that is that the bad people can't get out either. It's really hard for them to get out. And if they do get out, then Apple figures out there's a hole in the walled garden and they fill it full of concrete to keep everyone locked in. So in FileMaker, we only have access to paths that stay in, for FileMaker server and Go, they keep us in our sandbox. Does that make sense? That we're restricted to in the sandbox. We try to go outside the sandbox, we get electric shock. Zzz, doesn't work. FileMaker Pro was kind of created as an app before sandboxing really was a thing. So for whatever reason, it is allowed to continue to access all these other areas, right? Like the desktop. In fact, on Mac, when an app wants to access a desktop or app wants to access a microphone, it shouldn't be talking to my camera or microphone. I just opened it, right? I didn't tell it to call Ken on a video chat or something. Next question, Margaret. Yeah, these are all Mac. So once again, they're little variations in Windows. So between Mac and Windows and doing development, little video differences in the fonts and styling and fonts cutting off, and then the path management is different. Other than that, they're pretty close in my limited opinion. We're going to get Calvin to come in and to upvote me or downvote me and probably help us with that. Where did some tables go? I have 3. Okay, this is great. So do we have hot air balloon, Ken, Mikey, one of you folks here? Canberra. So this is great. 3 tables in my database have gone missing, sort of. I've added a field and changed some relationships on one of them, but the other two have not been touched and were unrelated to other tables. Consequently, I wouldn't think that the changes I made to the modified table are relevant. By sort of missing, I mean that the tables and their fields show up in managed database, but not in the relationship schematic. Nor do they appear when I try to use them on layouts. If I try to create a new layout, the tables don't appear in the drop-down on existing, and the fields say missing table. Does anyone have a thought about this? I'm pretty sure I know what the answer is. Okay, Ruben the Frog. You're such a bad, but Ruben, someday I'd like to meet all of you folks. You guys are great people. Ruben just nailed the question. He says, in the basis of FileMaker, you have a FileMaker FMP12 file. So in the FMP12 file, you have tables at the base level. Built upon tables are table occurrences. Built upon table occurrences are layouts and and calculation fields and all this other stuff. So if you have a table can have, or a file can have tables, but those tables don't have to have table occurrences. When you create a new table, it automatically drops a table occurrence for you on the relationship graph, but you could delete it, which means that it's down in the guts, but there's no TO, which means that the layouts can't see it at all, invisible to them. Now, if you had a layout that was based upon a table occurrence and you delete the table occurrence, then the references back on, if you go back to layout, it'll say field missing. And it's not really the field's missing, yeah, technically. Really, the whole table occurrence is missing. Okay? So Ruben drilled that one up. So listen, Ruben, you got 3 upvotes. That's awesome. Nicely done, Ruben. You get a gold star. Over here is this file that this person had. Field definitions. He has tables over here. So these are all the tables. If for any of these tables to be visibly accessible, or accessible in a calculation, or even in a script, they have to be in a table occurrence over here. So if you have a table that doesn't have a box, at least one box somewhere on this graph, forget anchor buoy, forget all that, just a box, even if it's not connected. Like we have this one over here, and it's not connected to anything, right? Then a layout can talk to this, okay? But if this is the only one that's attached and you delete it, then the layouts can't get to it. So there we go. So very important kind of hierarchical conversation. Next question. I adopted an orphan kitty cat and I can't delete it. I have a patients table and a related encounter table. Ooh. An encounter table for one patient has one record with no encounter ID and no patient ID, and I can't delete it. Yet it appears to be a record under the patient's file. When I see stuff like that, either the person doesn't understand how it works, or they ran into a bug in FileMaker, or maybe there's a. Here's the deal: about the time you think it's a bug in FileMaker or your FileMaker file's corrupted, and you write a note to Claris saying, "I found a bug in your," then you find out that you were wrong. I can't tell you how many times I have embarrassed myself saying, "Hey, this broke," and then you realize, Richard. God, you blew that one. It's so bad. And of course, you announced it to everyone at Claris. Because I forgot to put a dot or a comma or something, it wouldn't work. And I was just stupid. And I was late. And so whenever I want to write up a complaint to Claris, sometimes I have to zip the lips and just sit on it and then think about it and then make sure it's not me. But most of the time when I find a bug, it's me. All right. So when I do a find function on a layout upon the inter table using it, the record shows up with no. Yeah, there's some. So the way this guy wrote it. See this right here? The way this guy wrote it. Andrew here. I don't know who Andrew is. Sounds like a pretty sharp person. I sense the same thing, right? Remember I said just now, if I think it's a bug or a corruption or something, I have to sit on it. He thought the same thing by the way this is written. Okay. Richard Russell, another person here, is a record showing up in encounters, blah, 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 blah. So so the problem is that we're taking it on faith because we don't have the file that this person set this stuff up correctly and accurately. That's where I would want to go back and check. I don't have a sample file here, I'm pretty sure. I don't think there's a sample here. I'm not going to bother with that. But based upon what this person is saying, assuming that they are representing it's not like they're doing it maliciously, but assuming they're representing the truth accurately, then it sounds unsavory, like there's a problem in the file or there's a bug or a corruption or something. That being said, I would go back and take this thing apart to make sure that these statements are accurate. Make sense? And once again, I wouldn't immediately go to Claris and say it's broke, because if you sleep on it, you get someone else a second pair of eyes to look at it. Like the other day, Larry came to me, had some problem, and Larry's a fairly talented developer working minor league baseball. And I saw problems almost nearly immediately. It took us like 10 or 15 minutes or whatever. And I could see problems that he couldn't see because he had been staring at it so long, he couldn't see the problem. So a second pair of eyes, they always say, is super useful. Right? Not just with FileMaker, all sorts of stuff, right? Yeah. Dirk says report a non-bug. He's been there. Yeah, I know. I mean, listen, I just feel bad about that. And partly I'm embarrassed because, God, you just told Claris how, Claris actually, the programmers and developers down there have run into the same problems you do, and they try to not be judgmental about it, but us being hard on ourselves, are like, oh my God, I can't believe I did that, right? Kind of thing. Any other questions from the team, Margaret?
No, I don't. Like, people have been definitely involved and interactive.
David, can someone tell me why there's so much hate about ODBC? Hate on using ODBC, been using ODBC for social 10 years, no, we're just luckier, bad practice, background. The tech is, okay, so I don't really have, I'm not brilliant. And so me personally, I always had a hard time getting ODBC to work. However, back in the day, that's how systems talk to each other. These days, with modern systems, people don't just do ODBC. They normally do REST-based API. Well, that's what the OData is. So the OData, and I've got a bunch of reading documents I'm going to be reading this weekend on that. I got it from Claris because I'm out of date, but they're starting to support OData. And Jonathan Monroe from Actual Technologies is involved with that effort at Claris. And David, I did not know about that. That was kind of given to me as a side nugget of knowledge. It's not really classified per se, but Actual Technologies continues to be involved. Jonathan Monroe, I don't know what he's doing for them specifically, because really with the new stuff, there's not really drivers involved. Part of it was the driver. Like, you have to have the certain driver version, and then it talks to everything and makes it work. Now it's REST API, but you're using, so it's HTTP request, right? So it's a web request, right? So that's the modern version of this stuff. So I think I would be more happy with that, because it'd be less sensitive to stupid that I would do by accident, if that makes any sense. David probably has a big conversation about this. I'm just old developer and need to get up to times with using APIs. Well, the problem is it's always what you're familiar with. I have an engineer just like you who has experience with ODBC, and he built the demo for us. It was using ODBC, and I'm like, dude, just use the new stuff so I don't have to tell people to buy the drivers and have the certain drivers compatible with certain versions of FileMaker or certain versions of SQL. Really, ODBC was always about talking Oracle to FileMaker, FileMaker to SQL, things like that. Well, these days with APIs, it's gotten so much better. So OData. So I will dig out some OData knowledge from Claris and drop it on your folks' heads, but it's literally the opposite of like butterflies and bugs anchor buoy conversation. It's like, can we talk about the finer differences between the top 5 warp reactors for the engine room? You're like, okay, some deep stuff. So yeah, so very, very senior conversation. So, but yeah, there's nothing wrong with ODBC. I just think that if I was building something new, I wouldn't want to build it upon technology that hasn't been deprecated yet, but it's on the way out. Because once OData really takes off, then Claris and other companies are going to find at some point, I mean, watch it keep marching on forever, because all these legacy systems are still using ODBC, but at some point, people want to deprecate it and get rid of it. And how long is Jonathan Monroe going to keep making ODBC drivers, right? Dirk says ODBC is okay for relational database for something like multi-dimensional or no SQL, but for relational databases, but for something like multi-dimensional or no SQL, rest of the way to go, right? So I can't, Dirk, you have more experience in that than I do. So once again, that's why you folks are here. You can provide color to the conversation. It's really useful. So, all right. Thanks, everyone. I appreciate it. Have a good day.